first job I had, I was a PA on a show called Mother's Day with Joan London. And I was there one day, and my office was across from where the executive producer was, and the executive producer was screaming at somebody and said, "You're getting fired. Get your stuff and get out." That's my first day. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And I was scared to leave my office, but I got up, had to go do something, and out came the executive producer. We met in the hallway. And I said, well, who was that? that was the audience coordinator. And I said, oh, is that a higher job than a PA job? And he says, yeah, it's the next level. And I said, okay, I'd like to apply for the audience coordinator job. And he said, what makes you think you can do that? You just got hired as a PA. I go, I'm going to do a better job than that guy, I promise. And he said, all right, I'll give you a shot. So I got a better job.
Did you really think that you could? Or were you just saying that?
I said, you know, I could give this a shot. I think I could generate an audience. This guy was going about it the wrong way. I'm like, this guy didn't welcome the audience. He didn't, anyway, I went out and I started trying to get audience. First I said, I need money. I want to print tickets. I printed tickets. I went out with a pile of tickets. I went to the senior centers. I went to schools. I was the Pied Piper. I went in, I talked to the principal. In those days you could walk in. Can I see the principal? I'm working on a show down the street. Oh, you're working on a show? Come on. Hey, we want to bring a class. You want to give education? We'll give a tour, blah, blah, blah. So all of a sudden I started filling these audiences. And then I'm like, okay. So I jumped up on stage and I started talking to them and doing a pre-show. I didn't know what I was doing. And I was kind of delaying it because they would start late and I felt bad. Everyone was sitting there. So I told them a joke. I said, these are the lights, these are the cameras. And when Joan London, who was the host of it, walked out for the first time, I said, now, ladies and gentlemen, the star of our show, Joan London. Everyone clapped. She was like, she had walked into a dark studio, the audience. So I got into the audience business. And I started out at Geraldo doing the audience. And then, because he's such a good guy, he let me come to him and tell him, hey, I have an opportunity to do some other shows. Joan Rivera show is starting. An improv show is starting. A game show is starting. They're coming to me, and I want to start a company. He says, and I promise you, Geraldo, it's not going to affect your audience. And he said, I trust you. Go for it. And he let me go for it. And he let me start this company for 3 years. So, it's like I was out there giving out tickets, Times Square. I was always kind of selling, handling, if you will.
Yep.
Out of fear and hunger, basically. It's true, fear and hunger.
Long time getting there. I went from audience coordinator to a production manager who dealt with satellite interviews and, up speeds and down speeds and K1 bands and all the satellite stuff. More of a technical management path. And I got to the point where I was like, I need to do something creative. I'm ultimately a creative person as well as kind of a business guy. And I went to Geraldo and I said, could I be an associate producer? And he said, well, what makes you think you can do anything editorially? And I said, give me a try, give me a try. And I remember the first meeting we went to and I gave an idea and he shot it down immediately and, put me down into a hole. And that made me ultimately want to fight harder to get to where I was going. So I ultimately became a producer there. And then I left to go to, after 6 years, difficult choice. I said, okay, I'm going to leave. And I went to Donahue because Phil Donahue had an opening for producer. And that's where we met. And I remember the first day there and meeting you. And we had a conversation. And you said, hey, I've been working on this thing. Maybe you want to do this as your first show. I said, well, what is it? And you said, Al Gore, Vice President of the United States. So that was the first show. I came from Geraldo, where we did a lot of relationship stuff and other kinds of things, to the vice president and meeting with the Secret Service. I call Phil Donahue, never met him because I started over the summer. I go, hello, Phil, my name is, and I'm one of your new producers, and I'm working on my first show, and we got Al Gore. And he's like, Al Gore, Vice President of the United States? I'm like, yeah. He goes, that's very good, David. That's very good. Okay. I said, so Phil, there's just one thing they don't want to talk about, which is what I thought they wanted to talk about, was reinventing government, and a $72 hammer and that kind of stuff. So Phil says, oh no, I won't do it. Won't say a word about it. Got plenty to talk with him about. Okay, great. Secret Service comes, they do a sweep with the dogs. It's really cool, you know. Anyway, it's showtime, and the producer of Donahue stands off to the side, as you remember, and that door was right outside of the control room. And we're in like the first segment, goes great, you know. I go out, I talk to Al Gore, I talk to Phil. I'm like, whoa, this is unbelievable. Start of the second segment, Phil says, let me ask you something, Vice President. Let's talk about reinventing the government. The door flies open to the studio. I get grabbed by the back of my neck. I get pulled through the door. I turn around. It's his press secretary. You promised me they weren't going to talk about that. And I said, I did. And, hold on. Show stopped. I said to Phil, Al Gore gets off stage, comes into the back. Here I am, my first show. I'm like, I'm getting fired right now. The press secretary says to me with the finger in the face, this is the second most powerful man in the free world, and you lied to him. And I said, Phil, hi, remember me, David, the producer? I called you on the phone. I said, we can't talk about reinventing government. He said, he paused for it felt like an eternity. He went, yep, I do. And everyone calmed down, and I'm like, okay, I got through the first show. Quickly, the end, the Secret Service guy says to me in one of the commercial breaks, he goes, what was that all about? I said, blah, blah, blah. He goes, man, you got a really cool job. Is that Saturday Night Live set over there? I go, yeah, that's the studio. You want to go see it? I'll run you over in the commercial break. And I took him into the studio. They took some pictures. They gave me a pin. I go, wow. I know, they gave me a pin. And he says, do you want to come with us? And I'm like, yeah, funny. He goes, no, but when we leave, I'm going to give you a signal. You look for me, and when I give you that signal, you come. I go, I'll be ready. Show ends, 30 seconds go by, they whisk him off stage. This guy looks at me and goes, I had my bag, I run with him, I go down to the sub-basement of Rockefeller Center. We go, there's 25 cars there, ambulances, motorcycles, you name it, it's there. We get in, I get in one of the cars, we go screaming out of Rockefeller Center, up the wrong way, 6th Avenue, over to the FDR, on the wrong side of the highway, the whole thing's closed. We get to the airport, Air Force 2 is there, the red carpet. We all get out of the cars, we line up, Gore walks by, thanks us, gets on the plane. See the plane taxi out, and I go, I guess I gotta find the subway home. And it happened just like that.
Phil Donahue had such clout that pretty much anyone you'd call, would say yes.
Phil has so much integrity. His show was so different from other shows. I remember you would never be allowed to put anyone in the audience unless you announced that person was there for a particular reason, as
Right.
opposed to at Sally, where you would have to book part of the audience to yell at the panel. You had to have the opposite
Yes,
side in the audience.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
And how did you come to be the executive producer of People's Court?
I made a call on a day where I got the owner of the show on the phone because the secretary was out because it was like a semi-holiday type of thing. And I said, I hear you're starting the show. I'm an executive producer in New York City. I think it's a great idea. Ed Koch is the judge, and I watched the show as a kid. He said, we already have somebody. And I said, well, you haven't met me yet. It just came out. Well, you haven't met me yet. Give me a chance, is what I was asking for. But why don't you send me your resume and a letter? So I said, okay. So I sent him my resume, and I wrote this letter, which I have to this day, just kind of selling myself. And I remember getting the interview, going to the interview, meeting Stu Billett, and meeting two of the writers who had worked on the Wapner show. And we clicked right away. And they said, we want you to meet with Harvey Levin. And met for 2 hours. And Stu said, call me after the meeting, see if you guys get along. And then they gave me the job.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So luck, a little bit of luck, a little bit of, a little bit of luck, and a little bit of squeaky wheel gets the oil.
A little bit of luck, but a lot of moxie, a lot of putting yourself out there and saying, this is what I want. And that's hard for some people to do.
It's hard for me to do. Nobody wants to be rejected. It's a scary thing to do, but you still have to have the courage to take those chances.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Good for you.